Hey family, how you doing? Silky One Sam, Silk here, man, with a great conversation tonight. Census Uncensored Summit, and we welcome you, and we want you to have your questions ready. Some great information will be given tonight. People tend to have little to no idea on what the census is all about, which impacts the counting in a negative way. In order to get the full funding, Urban One and the City Planning Commission have teamed up for a real conversation about the census called Census Uncensored. The goal of this event is to increase the current and self-response rate, which currently sits at 65.5%. This event will provide candid conversation about how the census impacts you, those myths, misconceptions about the census, consequences on if you guys do not fill it out, and how to make sure your family and friends and loved ones are counted. How you doing today? Hey. Well, I'm charged up, baby. Hopefully you charged up. Welcome, my panelists. Give it up for Freddie Collier, the director of the Cleveland City Planning Commission. How you doing, Freddie?
How you doing, Sam? What's up, man? How you doing? Good to see you, bro.
You too. Tracy Hill, MED, Executive Director of the Family and Community Engagement for the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. Tracy, welcome.
Hey there. How you doing, Clee? All right, let's get this done. Let's get it counted.
All right. Danielle Sitno is the president of the NAACP branch. Danielle, good evening.
Hey, Sam, I'm charged up. You know, I haven't
I haven't said in a while. And I know Devontae Nichols is charged up, advocacy engagement coordinator of the Cleveland Votes. What's happening?
Hi, what's up?
What's up?
The census is up, man. The election is up, man. Let's do this, people.
Right.
Maisha Crow, I know she's charged up, executive director of the Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance. Welcome.
Thank you. Hey, everybody.
You guys ready to dive in?
Let's do this.
Let's do it.
All right. We want to see what we're going to part one and how the census impacts you. I want to go to the audience and see what they have to say. Let's dive in.
I don't know too much about the census. I think it's to require how people feel in the neighborhood, get people's ideas. I don't really know too much though.
All right. A lot of people, don't know. So we want to go to Freddie. What is the 2020 census and why is this so important?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. So the Constitution requires that a census count be taken of the population every 10 years. So it's actually federally mandated.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's really important about the census, man, is we need to account for every resident in the country. And the reason why this is critical is because we need to know what the needs of the people are. And without an accurate count, we can't account for individuals. And as you know, we come from a lot of different spaces, a lot of different backgrounds. There's a lot of different issues that we have to face. And all of those things require resources. I often give the example to people, if you have 10 kids and financially you only account for 5, you're gonna have some problems, right? And I think from, our perspective, when you're not counted, we lose money, we lose representation, and there's a ripple effect. But the Constitution actually requires us to fill out the census form. Now, there's not a lot of penalties or anything that holds people accountable to not filling it out, but it is mandated and it is required by law that people fill out their census forms.
Yeah. Devontae, how does our community benefit from the census information, this information we're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Freddie hit it right on the head. Like when we're talking about these resources, people love to throw the magical number $1,814 out. But what we fail to realize is that is $1,800 for the next 10 years. So multiply that number times 10. That I cannot do my math, y'all. It is Friday. Ooh, what is that? $80,000. That is for the next 10 years. So to Freddie's point, if you have 10 kids, you're only financially taking care of 5. Well, what about the other 5 in terms of 5 times $18,000? Like that is so much money that is being lost for those 5 kids. You know, we always talk about streets and roads. You know, everyone, all of us, we use the streets and roads. We all love to complain about if we're on these roads and there are potholes.
I'm riding down 93rd, and then my hood cap, city owe me some money.
Right.
Woo, 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 woo.
Exactly. And so when we talk about these roads and these potholes, you know, that goes back to the census. When we talk about our schools and like CMSD getting appropriate funding to accommodate all of our students, that goes back to the census data. When we're talking about whether or not we need a Dave's or a corner store or a liquor store, you know, business developers use census data to determine that. So, you know, each and every, like we deal with the census, or rather the census data, in our everyday lives.
Yeah. And Danielle, what does the census mean for low-income and minority communities?
You know, Sam, I think that the other panelists have kind of already hit some of the main points. It is about financial resources, but it's also about representation, because in many of our communities, what we lack is a voice and a seat at the table. And so when our communities are undercounted, they don't have to listen to us as much. People who are making decisions can kind of quickly pass by and say, I don't need to focus my time and energy and effort in this community because there's nobody here. Nobody makes plans for people that don't exist.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
Our voices to be at the table, we have to make sure we're counted.
Yeah.
Right.
Why I want to ask Tracy this question. Why do you think a lot of people are afraid to fill it out or just don't take it serious?
Well, I think it comes down to just an awareness of what the census means in terms of representation, as my fellow panelists have indicated, in terms of representation at the government level, but also that people don't realize the impact on many of the social services that are put in place for the community.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the funding that we get for our preschool and early childhood programs, our schools, our educational service centers, and other resources that support the schools actually come through federal funding. And one of them is through ESSA and Title I funding. And this funding is actually calculated by the level of poverty within a municipality or a region. And I think that you are all aware that we were just designated, again, the poorest city in America for a population of over 300,000 K. And that definitely does have an impact on the ability of schools to serve students. And when we don't count our youngest people, so if you have a newborn baby, if you have kids who are not of school age, this actually impacts the educational system that they will serve them for the next 10 years. And people often ask, well, why can't you do this and why can't you do that? Because those dollars aren't allocated. The thing about the census is that, as Brother Devonta indicated, that there's like $1,800 per person. And that's regardless if you are 3 months old, 80 years old, 13 years old. And when you think about the children, you know, you're thinking about this is funding for the next 10 years that's given to schools and to the roads and to hospitals and to mental health care and all of the services that support our families. And again, given that we have been newly designated again as the poorest city in America, it's just our civic responsibility as residents, as citizens, as members of this community. When we talk about the vote, stand up and be counted. When we talk about Black Lives Matter, stand up and be counted, have a voice. This is equally important to our community, especially to communities of color in this urban setting, that we also take the time to stand up and be counted, not just for ourselves and for representation, but for the future of the children of Cleveland.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm about to vote for you, Tracy.
You know, Sam, can I add to what Tracy said?
Please.
Can I add to what Tracy said? Because I think she really touched on something that's really vital. And I think that's the importance of participation altogether. And I want to share a statistic with you guys because this is serious. Adolf Hitler was elected to power with only 30% of the vote participating in the election when he was elected. 30%. That means 70% of Germans did not vote in that election. And that lack of participation brought one of the most tyrannical individuals in history to the world stage. Think about that.
Yeah.
So when you think about participation and how critical it is, you don't know what you could be unleashing by checking out or not participating. And participation is critical in order for democracy to work effectively. And I think that, to Tracy's point, participation just means so much, and we can't afford not to.
And especially right now, given the political climate that we live in, we have, and I think you all know, this is a critical election year. Do we want to sit in the sidelines as people and say that my voice doesn't matter? I've heard people talk about the Electoral College and how unfair that is and how unjust it is, and my vote doesn't matter. Every vote matters.
Right.
And every child and adult and resident of city matters right now, especially with the census, because we can't go back next year and say we didn't get the allocation that we needed to support our schools and support our roads and support our medical community. And why is that? Well, why it is because too many of us sat on the sidelines. And it's not because people, aren't willing to do it. I think there's a lot of fear associated with the census in terms of personal information being shared. I think that there's a lot of mistrust of the government, especially now in this climate, of what they're going to do with my information. Will they take away my benefits? Will they do this if I report this many people in my household? And what people need to know, by law, with the census, your information is withheld it's confidential by law, by constitutional law, for the next 70 years. They can't share your information. So, we think about ancestry.com. If many of our ancestors did not participate in the census, when you go to ancestry.com or try to trace your ancestors and the people that came before you, if they didn't participate, and many of them did, then we wouldn't be able to track where we came from, from the southern states, and figure out who we are and where we came from. So this information is not only important in terms of funding for critical services for our community, but in terms of also documenting our legacy as a people in this nation.
Absolutely. And Maisha, we want to talk about the census. Why is it every 10 years? That's one of the questions that someone has here.
Well, thank you to everybody who answered before me. I think you guys answered it really well. Outside of it being law, like the Constitution mandates us to do it, I think the most important thing is that note that it comes every 10 years. To piggyback off of Tracy, is that there's people who are counting on us to show up for the census. Like, my daughter cannot do the census, but my vote and my time is it allocates the resources for her. So we think about it in a way that we always want to give back to the hood. We also want to leave some for our family and for our friends. If we take the time to complete the census that comes every 10 years to say that we did this part, it don't have to come out of your pocket to be to give back to them. But if we just use our time and in this moment to fill out this information sheet, then we did give back to our children and our community. And for people who are not exercising their right to, we are doing that piece. So if I can't leave wealth for you, know that I dedicated 10 minutes of my time to fill out this information sheet. And for that, I did my part. So we just need more people to do their part in that 10-year period, because there's so many people who cannot, speaking about our children. So just do your part as the adult so that our children can have what they need. And that's it.
That's right.
I want to remember, any guys, you guys could jump in here. It's not just the question, for one person. I do want to mention this, though. What about during this pandemic? We've heard stories of not enough, computers to go home. Some saying the internet in certain communities, the kids can't get on. How does this play a part?
So a couple of things, all of those things are relevant and is true. And I think what COVID has done is it illuminated a lot of issues that I think we face as a nation, some of which is what you just stated. But I will say this with respect to the census. This is the easiest census to partake in. And one thing COVID has done is it really accelerated people's use of technology. I don't care whether you're rich or poor, most people got a cell phone. And this census can be filled out by internet, by telephone, calling the number. Mm-hmm. It can be filled out by your mobile device, and you get it in the mail. So there's like no excuses. And I'll give you an example too. You know, COVID-19. COVID-19 is very real. You know, we're 5% of the world's population with the most COVID cases, so it's no joke. But I say to myself, when I looked at all the issues that we've had this year in 2020 with respect to social unrest and people, you know, marching and coming together for what they believe that mattered, where they were willing to take the risk. People were in each other's face marching. And if you're going to take that risk, be a part of taking the risk of taking the action to vote and fill out that census form. It's less risk involved in that, but more influence and power associated with it. So we have to start challenging ourselves. And to Maisha's point, because she touched on the children, because that's really relevant, we need to stop coming at people every decade. This needs to be a part of the DNA of our citizens. So in our schools, you know, what happened to government? What happened to civic courses that really taught children, A, you need to vote, what that means. B, you need to fill out your census form, and really helping kids to understand how to be good citizens. Because in the next 10 years, the people who are going to be hit up for the census and voting and all of those things, voting more frequently, those are those kids you're talking about. They could be learning this in school. So it's not so labor intensive, and we have to sell them on something that's going to benefit them.
Yeah.
I think two other things that Freddie also hitting on is like, yes, it's very important to educate the youth, but it's equally as important to educate the adults as well. And I don't want to miss that point. There are also a ton of adults who perhaps want to be want to be civically engaged, but they don't know the articles of government. They don't know how the census impacts the presidential election, how the census impacts, you know, business development in their daily lives. And the second thing that I want to talk also hone in on, was technology. Like, I think Freddie hit it right on the head in terms of, you know, this year's census being this census being unprecedented because of technology. But we also have to acknowledge that the state of our city prohibits a lot of individuals who perhaps want to complete the census being unable to. What happens if you are in a digitally redlined community and you still have the cell phone, you perhaps have the MacBook or the computer, but because there's literally a lack of an infrastructure that inhibits or prohibits you from completing the census, adds another set of barriers in that process. So it's a matter of having to shift that power, you know, elevate digital equity, educational equity, and more, as well as amplifying the importance of civic engagement and beyond.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I can say honestly, just because I've been in the district for 10 years, that, you know, we do have a robust, with many of our youth and our student advisory councils at our high schools, part of the social studies curriculum. You know, this whole year, we had a very robust campaign in CMSD around the census. I think we got out of the gate earlier than many people because we realized the importance of the census and the importance of building awareness among our families. As part of our reopening strategy, we actually did do surveys of our families and included in it information about how to complete the census. And many of our educators actually helped our families complete the census. So we had about a 35% participation rate in this survey. And of those families, about 9,000 families of the 21,000 that we have in our district, 85% of our families said they had completed the census. So I think, you know, it's all about education. It's all about lifting people. It's all about making people aware of their power and their impact. And it's also about making people aware that these dollars that come from the federal census to our communities based on our population are that's our money as taxpayers. It's not free money. It's money that we've already paid into a system. So if we have all of our families, regardless of their incomes, whether they be low income or middle income or of the higher SES status, this is money that we're paying into the system that pays for the president and all the stuff that he does, all of our representation, our city council members, our government, we are paying into a system. And when we don't take the time to stand up and be counted,
great job,
then, you know, we can't make excuses, you know. So this is why this kind of awareness building is so important. And we have all, Freddie, Maisha, Danielle, Devonta, we have been doing this for the last 9 months, building this awareness. And now it's time for the citizens of Cleveland who have said, I don't know what this is. We're telling you what it is. We're telling you how important it is. Pick up the phone. And I will say also that Cleveland CMSD has done a phenomenal job, given the 6 months that we've been under the COVID crisis, of ensuring that every CMSD household has either a hotspot or access to broadband internet access. Through partnership with Freddie and the city of Cleveland and many of our community partners. So we've wiped that excuse away. Now it's time for people to do what they need to do for the children and for themselves in the city. And I'm just saying that, you know, not out of trying to be harsh or anything, but out of pure love, people, we've got to do better for our kids, and we've got to do better for our community. We've got to lift ourselves out of being the poorest city in the nation. And this is the way we can do it, by taking action and standing up for ourselves and being counted.
All right, let's go to our audience and find out what's going on. What's the question here?
Because I don't want the government in my business.
I don't want the government. Right, he was serious. I don't want the government in my business.
Right.
Wow. Come on now.
Come on.
Who want to go first on this one? Danielle, come on.
You know, the thing that I say is, especially as we're watching this on Facebook, for anybody that has a smartphone, anybody that's on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, name them all, you're walking around with a GPS in your pocket. The government knows where you are. You tag your location in half of your pictures, right? So we have to realize that we're not giving the government any additional information. The questions that are asked are simple. It's 9 questions on the census to just gain an idea of who is actually in the community. And it's to ensure that we get the resources that our community deserves. So that if we're looking for jobs, if we're looking for childcare, if we're looking for basic needs in our communities, again, we talked about the healthcare and all those other things. You have a lot of people who are making money off of your data today, and they're not giving you anything in return. This time, you can give your data to somebody and get some money back for your community. So again, anybody who's watching on Facebook, please don't allow that to be your excuse, because Mark Zuckerberg and his team are making a lot of money collecting your data and knowing that you watch this Census Uncensored. So they're going to show you some other advertisement based on that. So this time you can complete the census and get some money back for your community.
Yeah, so consider it a government rebate, because you already paid them.
Is that a good say, government rebate? Oh boy, that's good. Yeah, I got to use that one. Devontae, you know, if I have a felony, can I fill out the census? Or if I receive the government assistance, can I fill out the census? That's a good question.
Yes, you can. And it's a great question. So particularly a lot of people tend to think if you receive government assistance, like to Danielle's point, like, oh, I don't want the government in my business. If I complete the form, you know, my government assistance is going to be, you know, taken away from me. That is not the case. I definitely want to, you know, debunk that myth. As pertaining to felonies, of course, you can complete your census as well. I think the caveat is more so as a returning citizen where you are residing. And that is the address that you want to put is the place where you live for majority of the year. You want to put that on the census. As we tell people also, it's better to be double counted than to be counted not at all. So even if you completed one time and then someone else puts you down on their census form, at least the U.S. Census Bureau had you down twice, and then that way they can look at the data and then remove one of those entries, but at least you're counted nonetheless.
That's right.
Yeah, Tracy, will my answers be shared with my caseworker?
No, they will not.
Yeah.
No, as I indicated earlier, this information is embargoed and it's kept confidential for 70 years. So your caseworker will probably be dead once they release it. And they are not allowed to share this information with any other government agency. It is embargoed information. It's confidential.
That's right.
Feel free to leave your questions here and your comments, and we're going to answer. We'll try to get your question here up on the screen. And so let's kind of talk about, my religion. You kind of answered it already, but, I'm Baptist, I'm Muslim. I mean, will that be shared? No, obviously.
No.
Right?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Your sexual orientation, your religion, and all those personal effects will not be shared publicly. And it's against the law for the federal government to share that information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, we're going to go to part 3. Consequences of not filling out your census. Consequences. If you do not, you got to fill this out. So let's talk about some of these consequences here. Let's go to our audience.
I've heard about the census, but I don't even know what it's for. I mean, I don't even know how it would benefit me.
She's like, I don't know. We kind of mentioned this earlier, just in case you're just tuning in. All right. Danielle, break it down how this can affect you, how this is all about you, how it's all about the block you live on, the community you live in, the school your kids go to.
Yeah, you know what, Sam, I would just say, even as we in this moment look at the indictment or lack thereof of the officers in the case of Breonna Taylor, people ask, well, what does the census have to do with any of that? Breonna Taylor was the first person in her house to graduate from high school. So let's think about how the system likely has failed her family for a number of years by lack of resources and quality education being in her community. She was also one of the first in her family to go on to college. And so we think about public universities and the resources that they get. We look at the number of representatives that are in her community and neighborhood that have the ability to pass something like Breonna's law that likely can lead to no-knock warrants being outlawed in the community. The representation comes from knowing how many people you have based on that census being completed. So for everybody that's enraged in this moment about the state of affairs in this country, you have to understand that all of these things are interconnected. They're designed that way in the Constitution. So we're required to be counted every 10 years. And the other thing I would say is that nobody tries to mess with anything that does not have value. The only reason there's so much confusion, there are so many lies, there are so many myths around this is because it's valuable to us to be counted and to be completely counted. So don't believe the hype, know the facts. It's $1,800 for the next 10 years that does not come back to the community if you're not counted.
Yeah,
and just think of it from a broad perspective too. You $675 billion. That's a large number, right? You think about the CARES Act that recently happened earlier this year, where people got stimulus checks and resources from the federal government came pouring down, but it was triggered by being in a emergency situation. Now, just think about how wealthy this nation is if it can pull the trigger on that amount of money to get out in the community just to help us get through a deficit. What if that amount of money happened pre-COVID, where it didn't take a pandemic to make folks care about the least of folks?
Yeah.
And we can spend money to be proactive. So when you think about $675 billion, you're talking about to the point made earlier, your tax dollars flowing back to you. How does that happen? Who makes the determination as to how that money flows? So this is another reason why we have to make sure that we're counted and our needs are present as well, as far as the programs that we need, our education system. All of these things matter. But again, we have to be the ones to be able to articulate that.
And
I would like to.
I just want to quickly say, I think you're also bringing up a point that goes back to Danielle's initial point, which is connected to civic power and the importance of like politics and government and democracy. Like, we are talking about the $675 billion being allocated to every state, which is then allocated to every city or county, which is then allocated to every city, which is then allocated to every neighborhood. But we also have to remember, who are those people who are then deciding how those funds are allocated? who gets to decide whether Ohio City gets this amount of money, or Detroit Shoreway gets this amount of money, or Larchmere, East Cleveland gets this amount. These are people that we are actually elected into office, so we tend to forget, about the significance of local politics and local elected officials as that pertains to the census.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's right.
Aisha?
That was a good point. And I just wanted to say too, like, I know a lot of our conversation is driven around how much money, money sparks the attention of a lot of people. But I think too, just being on the other side of this is like, you're telling me that I'm bringing all of this money back to my neighborhoods, the same hoods that I may have lived in the past 10 years, and I don't see where that money has been resourceful. So when you think about painting a picture, like, don't sell me on the money. Show me, like, paint the picture. And I think we're doing a really good job at saying what it's attached to. But I think our point has to be a lot greater than saying a dollar amount. Because the reality is, if you're not giving me a stimulus check that I can do whatever with, like, the outside money doesn't matter to me and all of the stressors and problems that I'm currently dealing with. I think I was having a conversation with Danielle and maybe Freddie. It's just like, when the census is done, I still have mad problems. Like, there's a world issue, but what about my community issues and my personal issues that after I complete the census in this 10 minutes that it takes, I still have food insecurities. I'm still homeless. My kid is still stressing me out about this education piece. Like, what's next? Like, what is the follow-up? What can we give them when we're asking them to do this and how important it is? What are we doing to that relationship piece? It's like, yo, I'm going to do this, but I'm still going to be hungry after I do this 10 minutes. Like, and I think bringing it full circle and say, how can we show them that this 1,800, like, what is the follow-up we're leaving with them with? So you completed the census. After this is all counted, let me show you who to talk to so we can show you how to spend this money so that it can be visual in your neighborhood for this 10 years. Because the reality is that a lot of people that look like me are very transient. The block that I filled out the census in right now, I may not live there next week. So, like, it's bigger than the hood, but we're doing it for the hood because we all move around so much. So don't allocate it to St. Clair. Like, whatever neighborhood you live in, pray that somebody completed the census there so that that pothole will be filled when your kid ride his bike and do that dope Willie that I know he's gonna do because he's so dope. You know what I mean? So, like, how do we paint the picture in a way that's not just like about the money, but about the follow-up? Like, do I give them to say that I don't want to just bring you in with a dollar sign? I want you to really understand what this looks like, and I want to show you who to contact if that pothole has not been filled a year later after you completed the census, so you can get I don't want to be the one selling you lies. Like, I don't want you to remember the census and think about me and say, like, yo, I've been here for 10 years and ain't nothing happened, but I gave you my 10 minutes. So how can we assure them, like, we're not just focusing on this world issue because the Constitution told us that we got to push it. When we bring it back down to the hood, how are we showing them that our voice is really used to show them how we're going to follow up and spend this money that is owed to us in our community?
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I actually consider myself one of those individuals, but because, working in a government space, in a government position, where we have to make those calls. And the same thing with the school district, we have to make determinations. And when we elect our elected officials, they have to take those resources and stretch those resources. And I'm gonna emphasize the word stretch, because when you don't have people filling out the census, participating and doing things of that nature, we're trying to make $1 out of 15 cents. And when you have that, you have to be very strategic. Now, when you look at the city of Cleveland, our city has come a long way. I don't care what no day, in the last 10 years or so. One of the things that I think that we're still facing, though, is these inequity issues that we have that are systemic, where you see marginalization of certain communities. And we've been very strategic at the city, making sure that we reinvest in these marginalized communities. The Mayor's Transformation Initiative is key to that, where all of our investment resources, leveraging with banks and other institutions, are focusing on East Side and near West Side neighborhoods under the principle of equity. But a lot of times what we have to do, because resources are thin, we have to strategize. We have to get into political battles in order to achieve those equitable outcomes. We're better off when people are participating, when we're getting our just due with respect to resources, because those conversations become a lot more difficult. And we don't have to be trying to stretch dollars as much. So this gets very real, and one of the things that I was saying earlier, and this goes back to the education piece, we got to make sure that people understand the system and how it works. When people understand the system and how it works, then it's very difficult to pull the wool over people's eyes. This is more about empowerment. And I think, Danielle, I know you work in this space all the time with the NAACP, is really the question is about how do we empower our community? And then we can only empower them, I think, fundamentally by what we teach them and educating them so that they can actually be civically engaged and that we can position ourselves politically to do what we need to do.
And I think this also goes back to a saying that I love to always emphasize, which is like, democracy is not often deemed as like a noun, but it's actually a verb. Like, we have to be practicing democracy each and every day. Like, this is literally what we as an organization, Cleveland Votes, we are always emphasizing when we talk about equitable civic engagement. Freddie, you hit it right on the head in terms of advancing equity and mitigating any form of, any sort of inequities that exist. But at the same time, it's a matter of like, one, vote, two, complete your census, but then the next step is now hitting up your city council member and making sure you're on the phone with them, making sure you're contacting your Secretary of State, telling them that you need more ballot boxes. Even though this is not about the census, both of them are all obviously timely. It's not. We tend to have this culture of instant gratification where it's like, oh, I did this one thing, I'm good. I've been civic. Let me go to the next thing.
Right.
Like, no, like, democracy takes time. It took, I almost cursed. It took us, it took us decades to get the right to vote. Like, so it's going to take us time to build the city that we want, the city that is equitable, that is liberated, that is safe, and that is humane. And that is just great. We can't sit here and think that you complete this one task and you're done, because you're only setting yourself up for failure. But I also want to elevate, Maisha, what you brought up, which is the deficit censor messaging. Like, oftentimes when we talk about civic engagement or census or voting, for a lot of Black and Brown communities, we love to center it around, like, these are the resources that you will lose if you do not participate. Or if you're already at the bottom of the totem pole and you're celebrating, the breadcrumbs in the lion's den, I don't got time for that, because I'm already in the lion's den. So instead, encourage me, help me reimagine and have that hope as to what my community will look like for the next 10 years and beyond. Otherwise, I don't want to hear this, because I'm already trying to make ends meet.
Yeah. We have a question here.
And so I think
ahead,
that
Tracy,
so I think this goes back to, if we look historically at the city of Cleveland and redlining and the desegregation efforts, but also looking at the communities that African Americans built for themselves in Cleveland. And you don't have to go too far to see where we had very vibrant communities where people were civically engaged, and brotherhoods and sisterhoods and people lifting each other up. So this is all about self-determination and determining our future and our destiny and putting it into our own hands. And no, you're not going to get immediate gratification from doing the census, taking 10 minutes to do the census, but it will impact the representation that you have locally, at the state level, and at the federal level. So when we're thinking about the people who make decisions about this money, and I just want to remind people, this is not money, this is our money that we have paid into a system, into the federal government through our taxes, that is being allocated back to our communities. So if 100% of us are putting that money into the pot and only 50% of us are standing up to claim it, they're only going to give us half of what we're due. So we have to talk about how we as people have to get back to the place, and many of us are at that place where we are lifting each other up, where we are are self-determining our futures. And being active and bringing that brother or that sister or that cousin or that auntie and saying that this is important. I'm going to go back to schools, because we do have a levy on the ballot this year, issue 68, which I hope that the community supports, that we need to keep moving the progress of our schools forward. We've been able in the last 8 years to lift our graduation rate from 50% to over 80%. By 30 points. And that's because of the investment and the trust that the community gave to us under the Cleveland plan. But the issue with having to go back to the voters every year is that we've already paid into the pot, and there's money that's sitting there for this city. And because of our low rates in the census in 2010, there was only a certain 57%, right? We didn't get the money that was due to us to support our schools. And because we have an unconstitutional state funding system, we have to keep going back to the taxpayers to increase their real estate taxes. When in fact, we've already paid into a system that owes us money to support our schools.
That's right.
But Tracy, the point you just made, in the state of Ohio, they have ruled the way our schools are funded unconstitutional. 7 times. It's crazy the number of times. But guess what? We have a legislature, and we have individuals who won't act. Right. So this goes back to when we say I hear all that we're saying, and I think Devontae and Maisha in talking about, like, we have to make it more personal. We have to make it more than this financial exchange, and we have to teach people how to execute the next step after, because there is a step after. The census is one of the steps. Getting engaged and knowing who your local elected officials are, thinking about and deciding to run for office, right? If you don't like the state of your current community, you have a mayor in Stockton, California that's 20-something years old because he was seeing all of his friends get killed on the streets of Stockton, California. And he could have gone on, and he worked in the Obama administration, had all of these great opportunities, but decided he wanted to run for mayor in his hometown. So you have the opportunity as well to think about leadership, but also understand the responsibility that comes with it. So, you know, you have politicians, they're regular people among us that decide to dedicate their lives to public service, to live under a microscope. But as community members, we get to hold them accountable and vice versa. So the census is one part. We need better legislators to make sure we can get resources back to our schools so that our kids can get out of a system that's not equally funded.
Yeah.
Just to add to that real quick, the demographic component of this is really important, you know, to bring it to the community level. You know, when we talk about things like grocery stores, you know, retail businesses, the things that are going to actually help to transform neighborhoods, all of that information, all of those location decisions by businesses are based on demographics. The only way we get demographics is through collection of data of people. And part of that is the census. Every study that you see has some component of census numbers analysis associated with it, because that is what they look at. If those numbers are wrong, then people are making wrong decisions. If those numbers are inaccurate, they're missing the boat. So when you look at communities, you talk about food deserts, you look at some of the communities where they're quote unquote food deserts, and you look at the demographics. And you look at where there may be low population counts, largely minority individuals. Companies, corporations are making decisions based on that. So this is why it's so important that you have the most robust information possible, because it's really important with helping to plan for the future of your neighborhood and your community. We use it all the time. One of the reasons why the planning department is the lead department in this is because of the importance of data that we use. So this is really critical, and it's a multiplier effect. You know, there's so many things that this transaction impacts, and I think this is why emphasis is so strong by the individuals on this call.
I think too, Freddie, I think this may be our last year going so hard for this, right? I think like the access to education and voices like ours, and people who are like personally and professionally using their voice at all costs, like, yo, this is what I know is right, and educating our youth. Like, I try to think about it in the aspect of being a mother. Like, my daughter is 7, my oldest daughter is 7, and she knows more about anything than I ever knew at her age. Like, she knows about how Black Lives Matter. She knows how to be unapologetically Black. She knows about the census. She knows about voting. And a lot of that stuff I did not learn until I was a young adult. And just figuring out how the gap between generations is shrinking, right? Because the more I know, the more I owe. And I owe a lot to my daughters and a lot to my community. And because of that, yo, my daughters are gonna be amazing when they're my age, because they just know more. So I feel like when I was growing up, I never heard of the census. But when I heard of it, I was excited because I was like, yo, this happens every 10 years. Like, I'm looking forward to every 10 years. So I think if we're just more intentional, like working with Tracy and making sure that the census is a household term and not just a push at that 10th year or that year when it's done, then people will be more willing to do it. Like, we share our information for a lot less. If Beyonce told me that I need to give all the census data to get a concert, a front seat, guess what? I'm just like, this is how many people live in my house. This is how much money I make. This is my ancestors, like, because I'm doing it. So, like, thinking about how we're able to give that information if it's something that I'm going to get personally. But if we think about the education and the experiences that we're making for our children and changing the narrative in our household for them to know, like, my daughters will already know at 7, 10 years from now, she'll still know that the census is important, and she won't even be old enough, but she'll be like, Mommy, make sure you do the census. So, like, creating conversation like that for our young people, and then our young people forcing our adults to level up. Like, imagine the 7-year-old going home from the Boys and Girls Club like, did you do your census? Like, what? Right. Being intentional that whenever we have children and young people, giving them information, because whether they want to learn it or not, like, I learned something boring today. I learned about the census. The information is going to be shared. So just continue to talk about it because it's going to happen. It's like,
but can I also just elevate? And I love that you hit it right on the head. You got to make the message applicable. Like, if you want, like, you to remember it, myself, like, if you want us to remember some stuff, like, bring up Beyonce, bring up Jay-Z, like, I mean, think about it. That's the same reason why Cardi B is so actively engaged or politically engaged. It's like, oh no, if you want that demographic to help spread the message, okay, get those trusted voices. And then also you also hit up on the term household name. Like, I think it's important to have this be a household conversation, you know, at the dinner table. But you also got to know, want to make sure that you're guiding, like, youth and children as well as yourself on how to activate. Like, it's great to educate, but don't educate me at the dinner table and then I get out to the real world. I hit these streets and it's like, okay, my mama told me about the census, but I don't know how to, like, I don't know what to do with this power. So it's like, you know, we don't want you to be idle with so much potential and so much power to the point where we're not teaching you how to, like, transform it into, you know, kinetic energy.
Yeah. I think the next time we go ahead, I'm sorry. The next time we're all out there, the next time people are out there doing whatever civic activities we do, even the people on this phone, I tell you what I would like to see.
Bless you. I
would like to see you out there with your kids, your grandkids, or whomever, and walking them with you, explaining to them what it is that you're doing. A lot of times we show up at parades, we show up at all of these different things because it's part of our work and because it's just part of what we're supposed to be doing. But grab your niece, your nephew, your grandkids, whomever, take them with you and make them work with you so that they can see it and feel it and touch it and start to understand it. It's the little things that I think can be transformative in our communities and start to get these kids more interested.
I would have to agree. Let's talk about the deadline real quick. And the question is, can we fight to get it extended? Where are we at with that? Who want to go first? Who want to go first?
Yeah.
Kind of the same place we're at with Ruth Bader Ginsburg's replacement. Yeah. Sorry. May she rest in peace.
You want to take that?
No, I said there's been some attempts. I know that the National Urban League had filed a lawsuit to try and get the date pushed back to its original extended time because it's supposed to be done in August. The pandemic allowed it to be delayed until October. And then mysteriously, it got shortened again to September. We know not mysteriously. We know how it happened to the end of September. So at this point, you know, right, we're still in this race as if we're not going to win and it's not going to change. So we can't bank on any kind of extension. We'd love more time, but with the time that we have left, we all have to do our part. For the folks that are watching, we're probably preaching to the choir, but you could probably talk to 5 people in your family to just confirm that they've done it. We've got a challenge, NAACP, Cleveland, NAACP.org. It's called I Got 5 on it. Like I said on my last call, all of us have had somebody in the family who's selling diet tea, weight loss, this, that,
Right,
the other.
right.
I got my 5 people to come to this meeting and build your downline.
I got some downstairs if you need some. Just
Talk to
invite
them
you when we
5
get off.
people about the census.
Yeah,
And
the
get
so-so or
5
something.
about
Yeah.
the census and 5 more about the census. And we can organize the way that we used to.
Mhm.
All right. Be counted. We want to go to our next video here. Let's just dive in.
I fill out the survey because I'm a homeowner and I am a senior citizen. And I feel like it's my duty to do this.
It's my duty. Come on. It's my duty. Yes. Someone asked a question earlier about how much money could be lost if this is not, if I would hate to throw one out there. I only can imagine. Who want to go with it first, Freddie?
Hey, you know what? We've talked about it. You're talking $675 billion. You're talking about over $1,800 a person. And to Devontae's point, you have to understand this is over a decade. That's huge. Yeah. And when you have that amount, missing, we talk about Cleveland and these. I try not to get caught up into these statistics about Cleveland. I'm born and raised Cleveland. I bleed it and I believe in it. And I feel like we still coming up. And I'm always feel that way. But I just say to myself that, we could be so much better. Sometimes I feel like we're this 500 squad that sucked, if you follow sports, and we have this potential to be a championship squad, and people feel it, because when you 500, you win in as much as you lose. And you're like, wait, we can take this to another level. But it's a mentality that has to change, here locally in our community. And, I just pray to God that, this whole COVID-19 experience really starts to galvanize people to, really step back and understand really what's important, and really start to, drill down and really get in the weeds with respect to sort of changing, our value proposition, locally. And I think from that perspective, I think we'll be okay. But just to your question, we know, to your point, Maisha, we know about the dollars, right? You're going to lose money. The question is, what are you going to do? And there's been a lot of activity going on for the last year and a half. And I can't tell you how much it hurts my heart, to put in all of this work and to have this perfect storm of, racial tension, what's going on at the federal level. And I'm not going to get into, our president and all that stuff. And just have COVID-19 and all of these things happen at once, and it's like, Lord, are you just, and I just try to, stay positive and just really just do the work. We just all have to just buckle down and double down, I think, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I would like to say, too, I know the question was like how much money we're going to lose out on, but how many lives are we going to lose? Like, that's the real point. Like, the lives of not being educated, the hospitals. We all know that there's an uptick in gun violence going on right now. And imagine not having money to the trauma hospitals to save lives. So I know money is important, but let's focus on the lives that will be lost in the neighborhood, in the education system, in the medical system. Like, that's the bigger piece. Like, we're all in the business of saving lives, and if we can do this, we can do it. We need to be counted because, I mean, at the end of the day, there's a lot of underlying issues that lead to violence, and not having resources and money in communities that are already poor is a definite way to make violence more acceptable. How do we get that off the table and make sure that people are counted? So I know that we're focusing on the money, and that's a big piece, but like, reframe the question and think about how many lives will be lost if you not take this 10 minutes and do it for the hood, and do it for the people.
And even to take it a step further, because you just brought, I love it. Like, I love that you're talking about lives. Like, what happens when you only have a level 1 trauma hospital that's the only hospital to handle people getting shot? But what happens if the shooting, for example, is happening on one side of the city, but the level 1 trauma hospital for the ER is on the opposite side of the city? Well, that goes back to Freddie's point about the data and determining where to put trauma 1 hospitals or where to put a level 2 trauma hospital at. Once again, this goes back to the significance of data and how data is just not numbers, but it's actually people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Danielle made a good point earlier. Data can also equal this. Companies profit tremendously from the collection of our information.
Yep.
And if that information is put back into the hands of people and we control our own information, and this is something that's on the horizon, it's a whole nother conversation. But Danielle, that was some knowledge. That needs to be a whole nother session about the technology in the future cities and things that we have to prepare for. Because this fight for equity and all of that, it's not over. You know, this thing is going to continue to evolve, you know, because systems are changing. You know, how things are being done. And as you can see, the illumination and exposure of inequities is really coming to light.
And Danielle, you said something earlier about the cell phones. I want to mention this. You want to worry about who's following, who's following you, who's tracking you. When you're on Instagram, ads pop up. And sometimes you're like, I was just thinking of that. Or you did a search for a new couch.
I walked past that.
Right.
Now here it is. So you need to fill it out. Somebody is tracking you, period. Tracy said it earlier. This is our money. This is tax dollars. This is your money. We want to do closing remarks. We're going to start with, let's go with Maisha.
So I would like to say, and speaking to the people who are not into politics, because that's the people that we need to reach, is this like, how do we continue to paint the picture so that you understand, and not only understand, that you can also educate the next person. So I would say to the people that are listening who are not as informed as the people on this panel, is just ask the question. Like, there's no such thing as a dumb question as it relates to saving our communities and saving lives. So like, and at the very end of the day, if you do not trust anybody enough to be that vulnerable, just Google it. Like, the access to information, preparing for this panel, I'm just texting Danielle, like, yo, help me with this question. Like, because you just have to know, utilize your resources, utilize the people that you trust, and understand that we all have a shared and lived experience that we can relate to. Again, the census was never mentioned in so I don't think my family ever were counted. But now that I know, we're always going to be counted. So like, how do you take something that you struggle with and make it a platform for you to build on? So like, let's just keep building. Like, no matter what it is, or if we don't trust people, know the reason why you're doing it and just do it.
That's right.
All right, Tracy.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, our schools have been focused on the census for the last 9 or 10 months. Helping our students understand the importance, helping our families understand the importance. But now it's really time to galvanize and help everyone in the community understand the importance of why they need to do the census. It's not just about the money that flows into the community, it's about power. And I'll say that again, it's about power. Having the power to control our destiny here in the Cleveland region, and making sure that we have the resources for our elderly, for our homeless, for our families that are struggling with their rent, for our schools, for our hospitals, making sure we have access to health care. It's about those things. Need to step up and be counted. The impact this will have in the next 10 years. Billions of dollars. That's the system. It's cash on check.
All right, I froze over here. I apologize about that. Danielle, closing remarks.
Yeah, Sam, I think in closing, I would just say we're trying to make this easy for everybody this year. We know that you can do it online. You can call in. You can do it over your phone. You can request that they mail it out to you. There's people that are walking around. We've got QR codes that are up in different restaurants around the city. You can take your smartphone, open your camera, point it at the code. It'll take you right to my 2020 census.gov. We got the I Got 5 on It challenge. So if you're somebody that's already taken it, If you've got friends and family that haven't, you can pop their cell phone number in by going to our website, clevelandnaacp.org, and take the pledge, and we'll text them and remind them to complete the census as well. But I'll just leave y'all with this. Nobody tries to take anything away from you if it's not valuable. So just know the only reason that we've got people trying to confuse us about the census and voting and any of that stuff is because the more of us that participate, it changes the balance of power, and we're a powerful people.
Yes, we are. All right, Devontae.
Yes. In closing, I definitely want to ditto everyone's point in regards to power. Also, it would be, remiss of me to not emphasize the importance of equity building. What we always talk about at Cleveland Votes is equitable civic engagement. We have to normalize the practice of what it means to be civically engaged each and every day. This is not a practice that happens every 10 years, every 4 years, every 2 years, but we have to wake up every single morning thinking about politics, government, and democracy and how that affects our lives. I will say, pertaining to Cleveland Votes, we have been playing an active role with a number of partners. Of course, with NAACP, we have a number of digital engagement efforts and infographics. So if you want to check those out and share information, please feel free to check out Cleveland Votes on our Facebook, Instagram, and even our website. We also have a number of yard signs and community partners throughout the city. A lot of partners actually doing a lot of efforts throughout the Northeast Ohio region, elevating the importance of the census. If you want to get plugged in, please feel free to reach out to us at info@clevevotes.com.
All right. Brother Freddie.
Yeah, and everyone just hit it on the head, so I don't have a whole lot to add to what was said, but I just want to say that we got to be careful not to mistake activity for success. This is about the results that we can get. We've put in so much work over the last year. Mayor Jackson has had a complete count committee for the last year and a half with a cross section of 80 some odd organizations. Tracy is a very vibrant part of our complete count committees. Devontae has been like the Energizer Bunny. And, when we look at the numbers, we see the numbers, it's like, man, okay, we got to do more, but it's just us working together, so I would just stress that let this current scenario be a lesson for how we need to move forward in the future. We can't be in a situation where we're working so hard, but those results are not panning out. And what that signifies to me is that we have to be more consistent to the points that were made earlier. Not just waiting every 10 years, but we have to ingrain this into the psyche and into the DNA of our community so that it's habitual. And I just would like to say in closing, if you're out there and you're listening to this, Danielle shared with you the information to access this. This is the simplest thing you can do. You can be standing in a grocery store and fill out your census form rather than reading a magazine. You can be taking a walk. Whatever you're doing, you can pause and take 5 minutes because it's just that important.
Yeah. Tracy, we had lost you. I want to go back to you.
I'm sorry, I got kicked off the internet, this broadband internet thing. I'm sorry, what was the question?
On your closing remarks, we had missed you. You failed out. You dropped out.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I was just saying that, how important this is to our region, to our schools, to our infrastructure, to our roads and hospitals and childcare facilities and elderly and rent assistance and all those things that our communities need to thrive. And it's so important. And as I've said earlier, this is money that we've already paid into the system. It's time for us to stand up and cash the check. It's like if you get a check in the mail and you just let it sit there and it, expires after a time. Don't let this opportunity expire for the community. It's money that we desperately need for all of the things that we've all mentioned. And again, it's about making this habitual. So it's just not that you do it one time. You instill in your children and your friends and your family the necessity to do this for generations to come, so that we as a people can be counted and have representation.
All right. I thank you all for what you guys are doing, the collaboration here. Really appreciate you guys. And look, I want you guys to share, those watching, share this video. Share it with your family, share it with your friends, and make sure you fill out your census. You can complete your census now at my2020census.gov. Guys, it's been wonderful. I appreciate you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys.
Census
I just want to